Also a brilliant idea.
What a
We're
good
joined
idea.
now by James Neil Bond from Texas and another James Bond who has travelled here from Sweden to speak to us today. Good morning, Jameses.
Good
both
morning.
of you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's go to Texas first of all. And James, we've got two very different stories here. You come from 4 generations of James Bonds.
That I do.
And that would have predated the first James Bond in your family would have been before Ian Fleming wrote the books.
That is correct. My dad was born in 1925.
So I guess we were saying here that it's either a blessing or a curse, depending on which way you look at it. How has it been for you overall, having the same name?
It is a 50-50 mix. You know, you never have your own personality. If you meet somebody for the first time, immediately they go to their perception of what James Bond or who James Bond is. So that's, you know, nobody's interested in you. You become second base right off.
Oh, God.
I mean, you can hide a little bit because rather than James Bond Senior or Junior, you all have your own individual middle names. You are James Neil Bond, so you could sort of be Neil Bond or James Neil. So you can hide a little bit, because if you go for the full-on James Bond, as the guy said in that clip there, I assume you get the same reaction every single time.
Pretty much. You get a reaction, you suddenly see their mind whirling, trying to think of what do I want to ask?
Yeah.
Instead of trying to say, nice to meet you, and what kind of work do you do, or anything along that line. It immediately goes to the character.
But your son doesn't mind it occasionally when it comes to romantic moments, because obviously having the name James Bond literally gives you the best chat-up line ever.
It does break the ice if you're looking for a date. You know, but sometimes after you are introduced as James Bond, you have people who you would never date want to go out with you. And you've got that problem of trying to shut that off and say, oh, but, you know, I'm in a happy relationship.
Yeah.
So it can be a curse that way, too.
I bet, yeah.
Having lived your life with this and seen the look on people's faces and wondering what they're going to say back to you, why did you do it to your son?
Well, actually, it still wasn't that big of a deal in the area we were in, and the fact that at that time I was actively in the ministry as a pastor of a church in a denomination that forbid anybody from going to the movies. So, you know, it just really, and we had him go by his middle name. We called him Andrew or Andy. And it wasn't until he got in junior high and got interested in girls that he started using James.
The James Bond bit. Well, James Bond, thank you. Let's come to James Bond here in the studio. The difference here was that you weren't actually born with the name James Bond. You decided to change your name. What was the reason for doing that?
The reason I changed my name James Bond is because of my father was serving during World War II for Germany, and he came to Sweden after that, and met my mother, and I get the kid together. And when I was 2 years old, he disappeared, went back to Germany. No one knows what happened to him. Oh, then I took like a person who had the same story as my dad. It was Ian Fleming. So I took his story to my mind, and because both have served during World War II for different countries, but the story, I think this is also something that reminds me of my dad. That's the reason I actually took Ian Fleming's character, James Bond, to my heart.
Like a surrogate father, really.
Exactly, like a father's gestalt. The father's there, yeah.
Yeah, but you've taken it to extremes.
Yeah, I mean, 2007, I changed the name legally in Sweden, and it ends with 007 now. So it happened every 1,000 years to change the name to James Bond.
So it's all sort of very symbolic of what you're doing.
Find something that reminds me of the figure and the name and the character of Fleming. Yeah, and that belongs to this Cold War also.
And this is very much a lifestyle for you, isn't it? This is the way you live your life. I mean, you've visited lots of locations, you've worked with lots of Bond brands. Also, you've got the cars, the museum. Just explain that for us.
Yeah, I mean, I started to collect 1965 after Goldfinger with Sean Connery. And it's still going on because it's also like a red line in my life to find so much about my dad and like that. So meanwhile, I tried also find information about what happened to Fleming in his life and to collect things from the different Bond movies. And I've been this for nearly 60 years now to collect so Aston Martin, Gondola from Venice, Hovercraft, whatever it is, books from Fleming, everything that's running for 20 years now in a small town, Nybro in Sweden, actually.
Amazing.
Well, you brought in your Nybro sort of brochure here of all the various bits and pieces that you've got.
Yeah.
And you brought a couple in. What did you bring here? What's the
here we have
ensemble?
Yeah, here we have Isabella Scruppe's bikini from GoldenEye, 1995, that she gave away for charity in Sweden, so I bought in Stockholm for 10 years now. And that also I also like to help people, you know, struggling with problems. And meanwhile, I can tell my story for people who have missing their fathers or mothers or that disappear around them when they grew up. When you don't have any father or mother when you grow up, it's hard to understand the life. How should you struggle these things with all that belongs to this.
Well, it's a fascinating documentary. Like, your story is so different here to James Bond over here's story. I know there's another guy who felt that he had to change his name, but to James Hart in the documentary because actually he had a horrible experience. So it's fascinating. The other fellow, it's on cinemas and download from the 19th of May, which isn't tomorrow, because I keep getting the days.
Friday.
It's actually on Friday, yes. Thank you very much. Thank you both.
Thank you very
indeed.
much. Thank you.